But, I can't shake this feeling that there was stuff done on the other side. And there were lots of things now that you can find on the internet, and there's and some credible evidence about FBI involvement, and so my question to you is, with all that stuff out there, I mean, and now it looks like the willingness of Kash Patel and others to start basically, do you think there's going to be any serious investigation into that side of it, right? What may have happened on the other side to take a political situation that was handed to them and exploit it to the fullest, which seems to me, and I don't know if I believe this yet or not, but I can't shake this feeling that there was at least some things going on the other side that
Yeah.
exacerbated to the point that
Yeah.
made it probably a bigger event than it
Right.
would have
All
been
right.
otherwise.
So as you know, presumption of grace to all, I respect everybody's point of view. And before I let Steve and then Mercedes respond,
Yeah.
I look very closely at criticism of our coverage of January 6th and at Republicans and conservatives who raise points to say this should mitigate how people feel about what happened. All I'd ask you is to be fact-based, right? Fact-based. And again, I say this with respect, to say there's stuff on the internet that buttresses that point of view. Stuff on the internet is not fact-based. It might be true,
True.
but you could go on the internet tonight and find that the American people owe Donald Trump an apology for January 6th, if you believe everything on the internet, right? So all I'd ask is, on this platform and in your lives, just be fact-based about what happened that day. That's all I ask people, and I think that shouldn't be a controversial position. Steve.
Not at all. I totally agree with that.
Steve.
And I think, and I shouldn't have said on the internet, because it has a
That's all right. I get what you mean.
There's a lot of bad stuff out there, but
yeah, yes, sir. Okay,
I think me and others have
Steve.
seen enough credible stuff out there that
Okay.
leads to some questions.
Understood.
Let's put it that
That's fair.
Thank you for that. Steve, go ahead.
I've seen nothing credible that leads to any questions about this. I think it's very clear. I feel very strongly personally about this because I know and have talked to a lot of the people of both parties and reporters who were in the building on that day, were threatened, witnessed what happened, saw the angry mob attack police officers repeatedly, saw the angry mob threaten staff of both parties again, threaten members, senators of both parties. There is no question what happened here. And there's no question that it was a terrible, terrible moment, and that people who committed violence against police should not have been pardoned, should have been prosecuted. And I have seen no evidence to support anything on the other side. And, again, I think it's highly unfortunate that Trump pardoned them. I think, of all the stuff he's done, I think it is the most indefensible. We can disagree about policies done. We can disagree about immigration. We can disagree about DOJ. We can disagree about where you are on a particular issue. But I think on the January 6th issue, it is a stain on the people who did it, and it's a stain on him that he was willing to let them off the hook.
Yeah,
Mercedes. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, no, I was going to say, Steve, I agree with you, and I agree about the bad actors that should, anybody that assaulted police, all that stuff. And the they I mean is not necessarily the perpetrators. The they I mean is for lack of a better way to put this, the other side exploiting the situation to paint it into this horrible thing that they can use politically against Donald Trump, which it was horrible, right? You don't have to paint much because it already was horrible, but there was this effort to build on it, to create a situation that grew into something bigger than it might have normally been. That's what I'm talking about. But I agree with you on all the bad stuff. There's no question. It is bad. I'm not trying to paint it otherwise. I fully acknowledge it's a bad thing. Shouldn't have happened. They should have done it. But there's this other side of it that really has been largely unexplored. And so that's what I'm trying. And I'm sorry if I'm not articulating it well, but
so Steve, why was Ashli Babbitt shot? She should have never died. Ashli Babbitt should have never died that day. Why was there a grandmother who was praying in the Capitol who wasn't part of the angry mob, who was sentenced to jail. Like there was over sentencing that was happening. Many of these individuals who were put into these prisons were put in solitary confinements for months. They were treated worse than murderers and rapists. Yes, it should have never happened. We all agree that it is horrible what happened in the Capitol that day. There was a lot of anger with individuals who did not feel that this election was run properly.
Mercedes.
Yes, sir.
I'm only interrupting you because I want Steve to respond to some of the stuff you already said, and then I want you to pick back up. But I don't
Okay.
want to lose the thread of what you said. So, Steve, Mercedes raised three things. I wonder how you feel about them. Because again, what we're trying to do is create some commonality here about how to think about it rather than just total polarization. I don't know if you're familiar enough to answer based on the facts. Are you concerned that Ashli Babbitt was shot? Do you see why people feel upset about that?
I think
Not
the
just the
loss of
loss.
life, any loss of life is.
I understand, but more than the
extremely
loss of
concerning.
life.
I do think there was an angry mob that was violent,
Yeah.
that was about to break into the hall of the U.S. Congress and threaten and potentially kill members of Congress, and that the Capitol Police and many of the people who question the Ashli Babbitt shooting will not question when police who feel threatened in various cities shoot somebody. The reality was there was an angry mob which was about to overrun the House chamber and potentially kill members. And as a member of the United States Capitol Police, the Capitol Police job was to protect the hall of the Congress.
Okay.
Which, Steve, to your point, and Mark, and Joe, to your point, this raises the bigger question as to why there wasn't enough security there. And we know that, and these are the questions that need to be answered that were never answered by the J6 committee.
Why did Donald Trump send a mob?
No, hold on.
Donald Trump did not. And I don't want to. We're gonna.
This program's different here. We're not trying to fight about Trump that day. That can happen lots of places.
No, look,
Mercedes,
I wish
Mercedes.
Trump would,
I want to deal with the three things you said. Okay. And Steve said what he thought about Ashli Babbitt. Steve's loss of life, horrible. He's nothing but sadness about that. But Steve's view is the officer was there. They were trying to get into the House chamber. He used his best judgment in that moment. And so his best judgment.
He wasn't attacking anybody.
Well, okay.
He wasn't attacking anybody. She should have never been shot.
Okay.
She should have never been shot.
Steve, second thing she said, she gave an example of a grandmother who was there. Do you believe it's possible, or do you know that it's true that some people who were charged really were charged unfairly, that they were indicted and swept up into it, and there's no reason that happened with some people? Do you believe that?
I don't think there's ever been a police investigation or a situation, a war or anything else that involves thousands of people and a large investigation where you couldn't point to somebody and say they were unfairly charged. I have known nothing about that particular case, but I'm not going to say. And if Donald Trump, instead of blanket pardoning 1,500 people without looking at the facts of any of the cases, had picked out, for example, I know nothing about this particular grandmother, but said, you know what, I'm going to pardon that person, or I'm going to commute this person based on a legitimate investigation of the facts of their case, that would be one thing. But to issue a blanket pardon to thousands of people who tried to overrun the citadel of democracy and stop the peaceful transfer of power is not defensible.